CBS 46 News presents Public Affairs on Peach.
My opponent, however, is running one of the most dishonest campaigns that Georgians has ever seen, quite honestly. But there is a good reason for that. She is trying to hide her extreme agenda because, as the governor said, she wants higher taxes. She wants a bigger government. And make no mistake, what she really wants is she wants a radical government takeover of health care, a single-payer system.
I've never run commercials talking about isolating certain communities. I've never voted to eliminate pre-existing condition coverage in the state of Georgia. I'm fighting for Medicaid expansion, which helps all Georgians. I'm fighting for great jobs, good paying jobs for every part of our state. And I'm working hard to make certain we don't just talk about our teachers, but that we truly invest in education.
Well, this time next week, Georgia will have a new governor. That is, if one candidate clears 50% of the vote plus one. And if not, the two will go to a runoff election on December 4th. It's been a contentious race between the Democratic candidate Stacey Abrams and Republican candidate Brian Kemp. Good morning and welcome to Public Affairs on Peach. I'm Karen Greer. Election day now just 2 days away, and we're ready to talk politics with you. Joining me now, our political analysts, David Johnson, Rashad Ritchie. Gentlemen, let's get right into it. Many polls right now released have the Republican candidate Brian Kemp and Democratic candidate Stacey Abrams really nearly tied. Separated maybe by a point or two or even kind of dead even. This is a close race. What are you seeing right now?
It's extremely close. What we're seeing right now is Abrams seems to have some momentum. Her voters seem to be turning out slightly more than the Kemp voters, but it looks like we're headed for a runoff. If that happens, Kemp would be favored in the runoff.
Rashad?
Yeah, I completely concur. Stacey Abrams has a strength right now. If she can win it this election cycle, that's better for her. But some people will say, hey, a runoff is bad for Stacey Abrams because of the race of the people that support Stacey Abrams. That's really not true. The reason why a runoff is a little more difficult for Abrams is because she enjoys a large portion of the electorate 35 years of age and under, where Kemp enjoys a large part of the electorate 60 years of age and older. They come back. They come back in very high numbers.
Well, let's look at the, just history here. Georgia's had a Republican governor really for the past 16 years. Right. So a Democrat, last one, it's been, what, from the late 1700s?
Exactly. But, I mean, what's different in this race so much is the Donald Trump factor. And I think this is why we're seeing the race so close as well. Donald Trump has polarized everyone. Even though Stacey Abrams hasn't run really as the anti-Trump candidate, Democrats are energized. They're excited about her candidacy. And they also see, too, Stacey Abrams here in Georgia, Andrew Gillum in Florida, as a test model of can they put together the old Obama coalition. And if so, they think it's got national implications come 2020 for a candidate like Kamala Harris.
But Georgia came out for President Trump.
It came out for President Trump, but it underperformed compared to Mitt Romney, John McCain, or George W. Bush.
Yeah, agreed. And here's the thing. Even though Trump really put his thumb on the scale and ensured that Kemp could win the Republican primary, he also polarized Kemp in ways in the general election that really can't be overstated. There's a level of saturation that has happened where Kemp really isn't the energetic candidate. He's not energizing more people to the Republican base, but I do believe Stacey Abrams is energizing more people to her Democratic base.
Well, part of the problem for Brian Kemp was he ran so far right in the primary to get the nomination, to get Donald Trump's endorsement. It's hard now for him to move back more to the center where he really is, where Nathan Deal is, and previous Republicans have been. And we're seeing that's hurting him among female suburban voters, and they hold the key. I think that's part of the reason why we saw Stacey Abrams have Oprah in Cobb County and DeKalb County to try to energize voters, get movement, but also connect with some of these female suburban voters who traditionally vote Republican but are leery about Brian Kemp.
We're going to talk a little bit more about the star power in just a bit, but just the gloves are definitely off. Look at some of these ads. Strengths, weaknesses to each candidate, what would you say?
Yeah, I think the ads are pretty awesome. They are vigorous, but remember, all campaign ads are out of context. You have to do research in order to understand the context of these attack ads.
Fact check.
That's right. You must fact check. But I enjoy the rough and tumble of back and forth politics. And it also, if done right, it also creates a curiosity about what each candidate really stands for.
And it's also energized and solidified their base, and that's what we're seeing. And with Brian Kemp, he's really got to energize his base in rural Georgia to offset the majorities that Stacey Abrams is going to have here in the metro area that we're seeing. That's why we're seeing Brian Kemp really not concentrate here in the metro area, but more in rural Georgia.
And as a strategist, would you have helped to create those ads with a young Jake and a gun and his daughter? Was that something that you think would have made voters want to say, oh, that's my candidate?
To win the Republican primary in the age of Trump, that's what you have to do. But the problem is you still have to win the general election. And the other problem for Brian Kemp, unlike Donald Trump, was people bought Donald Trump's persona. They believe the Donald Trump that you're seeing, politically incorrect, offensive, that's Donald Trump. The problem for Brian Kemp right now is he ran as a Donald Trump candidate in the primary, but now he's trying to sell himself more as the middle-of-the-road Nathan Deal-like candidate in the general election.
Let's talk about the voter suppression claims that have been going on in this race. How is that going to hold up with voters out there who are concerned they're not able to get their votes cast?
Yeah, it's already working for the Democratic candidate, and here's why. The issue of the 53,000 people who are in limbo, it really doesn't matter. And I say this not from the perspective of your right to vote, but it really doesn't matter if they are added or not added, or if they are allowed to vote or not allowed to vote in the scheme of the political narrative. What matters is the fact that for the last 2 weeks, national and local news has been talking about it. That's earned media for the Democratic candidate that they do not have to pay for. So in that way, it has already translated into a positive for the Democratic candidate.
All right.
It definitely has. It's made Brian Kemp on the defensive, and we've seen that locally and nationally as well. He might have the law on his side, but it's hard to argue that. Just ask Robert Bork with his Bork hearings.
Yeah. Well, we've got lots more to talk about, guys, so don't go anywhere. We are going to regroup, get some of these other questions that you're interested in hearing about when we come back. Now, Oprah Winfrey was in town last week, as well as President Barack Obama stumping for Stacey Abrams, just to name a few Hollywood stars backing the Democratic candidate, and the current president and vice president of the United States, Donald Trump. Mike Pence also making trips to Georgia for the Republican candidate. How effective can the big names be when it comes to swaying Georgia voters? We'll be right back with that answer.